for real training. While we attempt to provide accurate commentary, we hold no responsibility on how you use the information we provide. Get medical training. In the blink of an eye, everyday order can be replaced with once-in-a-lifetime chaos. Be prepared. This is the Civilian Medical Podcast.
I have to concentrate and hit the pause button because it just keeps replaying. So I have to focus. I can't do anything else. I got to focus on hitting that pause button. So, hey guys, welcome to another episode of Civilian Medical Podcast. This is episode 76. So I got my friends on here, Bobby Wells and then Matthew from Tactical Comms. So how are you guys doing?
Well, I'm doing well, other than the fact that it is now summer here in Texas. So we've already seen our first 100-degree day, and it's got to that part of the year where you don't want to go outside for anything.
I'm doing great, and I hate that for you, Bobby. It's hot, but you moved out there. I'm just saying.
I did. It's my fault.
I love summertime though. I'm I don't want to be cold. So, all right. So we had Matthew on last episode, and you guys really enjoyed it. We got a bunch of good feedback and things like that. I even had a comment on my YouTube channel said that we should do it more than once a month, and I'm like, this is what you get, guys. People are definitely excited to have the podcast back. So we had Matthew on, and I thought it could have been a couple hours just talking to Matthew about comms. So we kind of brought him back to kind of talk about more comms. So we're going to talk about emergency communications, and it can kind of overflow into civilian world too. So I kind of want to talk about that. It's kind of like Matthew's bread and butter is talking about communications, emergency comms. When things go bad, we may not have traditional communications up as well. So that's kind of Matthew's bread and butter. But first, since we are a civilian medical podcast, I wanted to ask what Matthew's kit is. What is it, his first aid kit?
So, we were kind of joking about it before you went live that a question I was reading, what is in Matt's kit? And then I said, whatever Skinny put in my kit. No. So this is my pack right here. If you can see it, and on the front of it, there is the Vanquish kit. It's got just, it loaded me up with a bunch of stuff, and I do want points. I really do want points for this one. I got to show you this because I was looking at it to make sure it was still in good shape. But my tourniquet is not in the cellophane.
There we go.
That's good.
I do want points for that. Proof you can teach a fireman tricks. But it is, it's basically a trauma kit or an IFAC on steroids. And I added some things, Band-Aids. It's got a little small travel bottle of ibuprofen and some things like that I added to it. And a little small travel bottle of aspirin as well. But, everything that I've got, and that's my pack. That's my comms pack that I take with me. It's got a lot of radio gear and stuff in it. And you notice that it's got a IFAC on steroids.
Yeah, we built a whole survival bag for your company, Fleet Talk. So each installer technician has a way to be self-sustained for a while. For at least a few hours, we got food, water, kind of some survival items. Even put them where somebody they can take a nap.
Absolutely. About I can't remember if we did Eno singles or doubles, but yeah, we had that. And the owner of our company was. He had some really good insight because this was before Hurricane Helene hit. He said, we get stuck at a site, I want everybody to be taken care of and have the ability to be self-sufficient. And so we modeled it after my pack, and I think we built 10 or 12 kits, and Skinny got all that for us. So it's a good deal.
Definitely. So, comms during disasters. So I know this is kind of your bread and butter. You spend most of the time in your career dealing with this. So as first responders, we're used to be able to key the radio up, talk to our dispatch or talk to our other units, and it's no big deal. Or as civilians, we're used to picking up the cell phone and sending a text, making a phone call. But during disasters, sites may be taken down, cell phone towers are overwhelmed, or they're just getting damaged, and we lose those comms. So I know you were part of a state team that really focused on this. Was after hurricanes and things like that, you guys would go in and provide those comms, set up temporary comms, things like that. So just want to kind of talk about that and kind of people, like I think regular field employees or civilians don't even realize that kind of stuff's going on.
No, they don't. And I just ripped it off the front of my bag. We were known as the Honey Badgers, and I won't steal the video, but it's I don't want to steal the thunder, but it was a YouTube video came out several years ago, Honey Badger, narrated by Randall. And we basically, when we started the comms team, it was one of those deals that you don't know you've got a comms problem until you have a comms problem. And then when you have that problem, how do you call for help? And Greg Hauser, he is the statewide interoperability coordinator for state of North Carolina. Great friend, and has probably done more for Mercy Communications than any single individual I know in the U.S. And he talked about in the early days of when they started the field comm program out of Charlotte Fire that they couldn't get anybody to call. And so they wrote it into the SOP. And he said he knew they were actually making a difference when they were short staffed one day and an incident rose to third alarm and they didn't have enough people to go. And in the after action, the battalions where's field comm? Why wasn't they there? And so it takes a little bit. So we kind of joked about it. We take what we want. And, every patch is kind of cool. You got the Honey Badger in the center of it. And we supported South Carolina National Guard, specifically the aviation battalions. And our job was to go into disaster areas, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, whatever the case may be, wildfires, and establish communications between the AHJ, the authority having jurisdiction, and whatever command element that needed to be gone. And I guess in a lot of ways we were JTACs. And we trained a lot, and we literally would go into places where comms did not exist, and we would test our theories. We would try new things and prove that it works. And I tell you that Mercy Communications is something that I'm pretty passionate about it. And Dietrich, that it's what was it when I taught you during COVID? I taught you how to build a jungle antenna, and every time I've ever demonstrated that, everybody looks at it like, what kind of snake oil are you pulling out of this bag? What hose stretcher, whatever you want to call it, sky hook. And less than 24 hours after we did that at Mom and Dad's, you deployed it in real world on a real world mission. I don't know if I'm sure you remember that.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up as part of our talk today, was the fact that we built an antenna that you basically with some sticks, you make the antenna point, you run your coax cable to your portable radio, your handheld radio, and we threw it up into a tree, probably 15 feet, no big deal. And then we're able to hit a tower, hit a repeater, fairly good. And then the next day, I'm on a hike. We had an injured hiker at a waterfall, and the gentleman who had command of the fire, he's sitting inside his truck, and he's like, "Man, I cannot talk to dispatch." And I was like, like the team was already providing medical care. Like I was late to the call. So I was like, let me play around here for a second. So I get a little rock, tie it up, throw it, don't hit any cars with the rock. So that was mission 1 accomplished. And put an antenna probably 10 feet up in the air, just above my head, nothing major, and handing him my portable radio. And he was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Hey, just key up and see." And he keyed up and I heard it squelch. I was like, "You got dispatch now." And so he literally got out of his truck and stood there and talked to my handheld to dispatch. And so
that was one of the questions with sticks and wires.
People were coming off the call. They're like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Nothing. Don't worry about it." So it's kind of unconventional, but it worked. So we all now have those in our backpacks, and we all were carrying those in our hiking backpacks. That way, if I get somewhere and I can't get comms, I can try the antenna, try to get to a higher point, and try to get that vantage, because we know that I have to be able to talk to either radio to radio or a radio to a tower, and I need to get that line of communication, that line of sight. So one of the things that we're talking here is like when you hold your radio, Matthew, can you give some tips to the firemen when they hold the radio? They're not like holding it sideways or just
No, it's not just firemen. Down. I was at an EMS agency not too long ago, and I watched the young lady talk on the radio just like this, and I thought, and she said, "This thing won't get out," and I said, "Could I hold it for just a second, please?" And all I did was turned it straight up and down and just talked on it, and I could hear my wife when she went, "Oh." But no, the point of it, is, in emergency communications, and particularly in first responder communications, things of that nature, you're trying to get the best bang for your buck. And so antennas are designed to radiate out and up. And so when you're using it like a cell phone, or you're doing this here, you're actually greatly reducing the capability of your antenna. Another thing is when you're holding it with your whole hand, your body becomes part of the ground plane of the antenna. It makes the antenna perform better. So the best practice is straight up and straight and down, 2 to 3 inches from your mouth, and speak in a normal tone. And that is going to give you the best bang for your buck. And I encourage anybody to try it if you're in an area where it's weak signal, weak coverage, especially, firemen, we like to carry the Boston straps. And all you literally have to do is pick the radio up and hold it and make it work. Your altitude for overpower any day. A lot of social media presence. Comms experts start talking about 100 watts. You need 100 watts. You need 100 watts. And you saw it firsthand in your story. This guy had the fire chief had a 45 watt mobile with a truck mounted antenna. You had a 5 watt handheld, 4 pieces of wire, 3 sticks, and some zip ties, and you were outperforming the 45 watt mobile. So antenna is everything.
I think we need a YouTube video of you guys making one of those jungle antennas and deploying it. That would be really helpful for people.
Absolutely. I think I've got one. If you look at my YouTube channel, Tactical Comms, there's a couple of videos on the jungle antenna, and it's a real thing. So maybe.
He's got a bunch of ideas. He's got nice microphone. I bought the DJI mics because of him, and he won't post any videos. I'm like, that microphone's awesome. So I ordered DJI mics. The sound quality was great. Now
I should have given you an affiliate link.
Yeah, I should have. So thinking about what is a system? You have a hurricane, you have a tornado, natural disaster come through, towers are down. What is the backup plan generally for most agencies? If those towers do start dropping down and now they're losing radio comms with their EMS units?
I think what I see happening is we're getting a little psychology here. There's the normalcy bias, and we've all heard about the normalcy bias if you've taken any type of active attack training, and it's our brain's ability to try to make something that's happened, something we're experiencing, fit into the normal category. Well, it couldn't possibly be this. It must be something normal. For example, you read a lot of the after actions, the survivors from an active attack say, I thought somebody dropped a book. I thought it was firecrackers. I thought your brain is trying to rationalize it into something that's normal. So, but also part of that normalcy bias is we get accustomed to things always working. We forget to train on the bad day. And if you think about it, just before the podcast, you were participating in some online training that you have to have. And so when you're competing against that short time window, there's not enough time in the day to spend time on those bad days. So a lot of agencies may have backup plans, but they don't exercise those backup plans. The weak link in any radio system, any cell phone system, any internet system is what we call backhaul. A lot of people don't realize when it comes to cell phones, for example, there's no magic in that tower that takes place that sends our phone call or our text message or our internet out into space. It has to tie back in at some point to some sort of landline system, internet or cellular or satellite. And then a lot of towers, like the network that my company has, all of our towers are microwave backbone, so we don't rely on those internets. And I know I'm kind of going around the long way to talk about it, but I want people to understand telecommunications networks are traditionally fairly fragile. And we learned that in Hurricane Helene. In our area of the country, if you were in the western South Carolina, western North Carolina, we experienced something when Hurricane Hugo came through in '89. I don't remember it being that bad, and the damage to infrastructure. And I've taught this. I've taught comms for years, and I was surprised at how fast the cellular networks went down the day Helene hit. And it wasn't. And I'm not slamming the cellular companies. When you have that much damage to the infrastructure, something's got to give. So I think the backup plans, the best way I can explain it is the acronym PACE, Papa Alpha Charlie Echo. It is primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. And primary, for if you're a public safety agency, could be your two-way radio. Some agencies, it's their mobile data terminal. It's that MDT. It's active 911. It's whatever the case may be. It just depends on where you are and where you work. But what happens when that primary fails? What's your alternate plan? So if your primary is data, you're using the MDT, and that fails, are you going back to your radio for an alternate? It's two separate systems, so you're building in some redundancy and reliability. Those two fail. What's your contingency? Do you have local conventional systems that you can change the channel on the radio and connect to each other? And then your emergency, primary, alternate, contingency, and then emergency is talk around radio to radio. And do you know where those channels are in your radios? And I would challenge any first responder, look at your comms plan, look at your channel plan, ask questions. What is this channel? What does that channel do? I'm a huge advocate of talk around channels, especially for on-scene tactical operations, that you don't have to rely on a tower. You don't have to rely on a connection. It's radio to radio, and it's as simple as it gets. And it's the same way in civilian comms. Maybe in civilian comms, our primary is our cell phones. Then what happens when, the cell phones go down? Nobody has landline telephones anymore. So, what's your alternate? And then your contingent and your emergency. And, for me, for my family, the day Helene hit, we actually got to the contingency piece and was discussing moving to the emergency. We had lost so many different types of comms that day. My ham radio repeater, the tower site where it was, I'm a guest at, and the generator didn't crank. It had an alarm on it that prevented the generator from cranking. So once the battery died on the repeater, we didn't have that anymore. So, there's lots of options there, and I could talk for days on that.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Real Work was texting. I was gonna say I was only 7 when Hurricane Hugo came through, so I don't remember much about it either. So Bobby's probably about the same age.
I remember it. But yeah, I think the thing of it is, and I think we as human beings, we get complacent and we think about. We don't like thinking about bad days because there's so much going around in our minds. There's so many things that you're having to prioritize. And whether you're a public safety agency or you're a single parent, there's not enough room oftentimes to exercise. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of resources out there. There are some classes that are out there, but they're expensive. They're $400 or $500 for a class. Now, I argue that they're time well spent and their money well spent, but if you're a single parent and you're trying to make ends meet, that doesn't come easy. And I think, but I think you got to get out. And a little later on, we'll get into some different types of communications that are available. But I think having a backup plan, I'll give you a real world story for why this is important. When your cell phones don't work, my middle son, he was learning to drive, and on Sunday afternoons, we'd go for a ride, and we rode into Greenville, downtown Greenville, and we went and visited the Army Navy store. I mean, what else are you going to do in Greenville? And so we got out on I-85, and I said, all right, take us home. And he pulls his cell phone out and hands it to me. And I said, what do you want me to do with this? And he said, well, can you punch in home on my GPS? And I said, just take us home, son. It's okay. And he was he was almost frantic. I don't know how to get home, Dad. And I thought, what do you mean you don't know how to get home? We're on I-85 South. We've been down this road 100 times. And then it hit me. He did not know a life without technology. And so every day we went and drove from then on, we learned lessons about following road signs, mile markers, whether you're south and north, orienting yourself based on a map that you can get in your head. And, so learning those skills, communications is more than just a two-way radio or a cell phone. It is, a good example, hike plan. I love hiking, and I don't do it as much as I used to, but a good friend of mine, he's training officer now at the fire department, Johnny Summey. He was always my hike plan. Whenever I would go on a hike by myself, this is where I'm going. This is the trail I'm going to be on. And this is when I expect to be out. And if he hadn't heard from me in a reasonable time after he expected to be out, he knew where my last location was or what trail I was on. So that's as much a part of emergency communications as a two-way radio is.
Mhm. So thinking about like hiking, things like that, terrain I know is going to make a big difference in our comms. If we're flat out, in the desert somewhere, that we have that wave's going to travel farther. But if we're in the mountains, where we have mountains. I guess Prep Medic thinks he has mountains, but we have hills. I guess how Prep Medic would say it. But we've had issues with comms down in the valleys, things like that. So how does terrain affect comms?
You can think about all communications are line of sight, and some frequencies, some systems travel terrain better than others. Traditionally, the lower the frequency, the more forgiving it is in unforgiving terrain. So, for example, here in our part of the country, 800 megahertz doesn't do very well, so you have to put in more tower sites. Whereas down around Charleston, 800 megahertz does great. Up here, UHF and VHF tends to work better. So when we ride down the road, we don't realize oftentimes how hilly and how many holes there are in the terrain. And RF, the radio frequency waves, don't like to travel through rocks, steel, objects, buildings, foliage, whatever the case may be. So everything that is physically in between you and the person you're trying to communicate with, or the tower site you're trying to communicate with, is a problem, and you have to learn to overcome it. And so at the beginning of this podcast, I talked about trade altitude for power any day. That's why I made the deal about picking the radio up and holding it upright, because every little bit helps. If you can barely get in at your hip level and you're 6 feet tall and you raise that to your head, you're doubling your capability and your reach from just picking it off your belt and holding it up.
Yeah. So what do you think some of the things you've learned in the past? I know you probably learned a ton, but some of the key things you've learned from disasters in the past. For me, I think about we were joking about Starlink before we went live, and when we had that missing hiker, we didn't have cell phone coverage up there, so we had limited radio coverage because of the terrain. We were still missing a tower up there from the company that was supposed to be putting a tower up there. So we were missing that. We had limited radio. So we ended up getting Starlink up there, and at least we had data that we could send text messages, send pictures, emails, and stuff like that. So to me, like, that was one of the things we learned, and our emergency management ordered Starlink after that. We were able to get it because we were trying to send pictures to the news media, and our public information officer was like, as soon as I get coverage, I can send that picture to you, to the news media. And I was like, hey, can I see your phone real quick? And I connected him to Starlink, and he was able to email that from the incident command, and like that won him over on Starlink because he didn't have to drive down. Like, I was able to let him send that email there. So to me, Starlink was a big deal, that we could at least send text messages. Because when I went to work that morning, my wife thought I was just going to the office, no big deal. And the next thing I know, it's 8 o'clock that night, and I haven't talked to her because I didn't have a cell phone signal. So to be able to send a text going, hey, just so you know, I'm going to be on a call, like, I'm fine, was also reassuring to her. I mean, she doesn't really care, but she at least know that she's not going to have to cash in that life insurance policy yet. So
she'll just text Mayor Campbell.
Yeah, she would. She'd be fine. But what's some of the things, like you're saying, like your big aha moment that you may have learned during a disaster?
So some of the aha moments are, I would say, are check the simple things first. There, so many times, especially in the comms world, we try to overcomplicate. And you use the Starlink. Really, Starlink in today's technology is amazingly simple to use. And so by just deploying that Starlink terminal, you had texting, you had internet, you could have had Wi-Fi calling, if you were using Apple devices, Google calling, some of those things. So check the simple things first. If you're using two-way radios, making sure you've got a spare battery with you. You know, how many times have you reached in to grab? The closest thing I got to a brother. He will turn every walkie I have on in my truck and leave it on, and just turn it on where it just barely. You're not going to hear it talking, and at least I'm not. And then when you go to use it, the battery's dead. So, but keeping spare batteries, a way to charge it, even if it's just a solar panel of some sort. Like radio manufacturers now are starting to include the USB charging, Type C charging on the back on batteries. That is a great aha moment for me. And then knowing what you're dealing with. When we were in Hurricane Katrina, the USAR team, we used UHF frequencies, and the UHF frequencies, the area that we were at, was it felt like you couldn't talk across the road. And so we ended up abandoning it after trying for 2 days to make it work. We ended up abandoning it for VHF, and then later for a military spectrum. A military team came in and allowed us access to their radios. And after, I don't know, probably 6 months, a year, I was at a conference and we were talking about it. And a guy that was a whole lot smarter than I am, he said, "Where were you at?" And I told him we were in Chalmette, Louisiana. And so he gets out and he starts doing some research, and the crude oil refineries down there had failed and during the flood, and so contaminated most of the parish in that area down there with crude oil. And the reasonable expectation was the pine needles were exactly 70 or roughly exactly an average of 70 centimeters long, which is the wavelength of a UHF frequency. And when you contaminate it with that crude oil, the belief was that it created a Faraday box for UHF frequencies. And, you know, there's no way to go back and try that now. So it's a theory, but, you know, nothing else worked. We've never before had that problem, never after had that problem. And so, you know, those are aha moments, knowing the areas, knowing things, that having alternate plans. I was trying to think if there was any other aha moments. I would say probably just keep it simple, stupid. Take the KISS approach. So many times we want the most sophisticated plans and comms plans and encryption schemes and digital modes, but sometimes simple is where it's at.
So you talked a little bit earlier about having a plan, and you referenced your PACE mnemonic of having primary and backups for your family. What does that look like for you as an individual, not as a dispatcher, not as a communications professional? For you and your family, what is your primary and backup plans of communication in an emergency?
So one of the things that we do as a family is we communicate with each other. Our kids are grown. Our youngest one, she's graduating this weekend, and but essentially they're grown, and they still talk to us. They'll still text us. We text them. We're taking a trip here pretty soon, and so we communicate. So even down to the simplest things that, hey, I'm going to be, or when I travel for work, this is where I'm going. This is when I expect to be home. And if I'm not home, my wife knows that was the last place I was supposed to be going, you know, where could it be? So even if I lose communications, I lose cell phones, she knows where I should be expected, where I expected to be. So as a family, I think it's important that you communicate with each other, and you should take the hike plan I described just a few minutes ago. This is where I'm going. This is where I plan to be, and this is when I plan to be back. That didn't take any technology. That took a face-to-face conversation or text message before you left. You know, any number of things. When it comes to cellular networks, a lot of times we used to call it the Mother's Day syndrome. It's the cellular networks telephone networks would become overloaded on Mother's Day because everybody was calling mom to wish her happy Mother's Day. And so we would teach people, don't make phone calls. Instead of making phone calls, send a text message. And because sometimes just those little packets of data can get through when your phone call cannot. Those are good options. But I think the most important piece is just communicating before the disaster. You know, Skinny Medic's slogan is, you never know when you'll be the first responder. You never know when technology is going to fail. So if you've communicated before it fails, you're ahead of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like having, different backup, text messages, emails. You can have Starlink. Like, we have Verizon internet, but we also have a Starlink system. So we have a backup internet, backup power. we have multiple ways of generating power here. Like the other nights, in the middle of the night, we lost power because where we're at, like I felt like the wind blows, we lose power. So we had a storm come through 2:00 in the morning. I'm awake because of the lightning, the fan. I hear the fan click off, and I was like, "Oh man, we just lost power." And I'm just laying there, like 20 seconds later, I hear my whole house generator fire up, and I just rolled over. I was like, "Money well spent," and kicks back on. So having backups to backups is important. Like we talked about that during Hurricane Helene coming through, was backup power, portable generators, solar, the battery bank generators, things like that. Having food, having backup for water. And so just having different plans on whether it be ham radio, FRS radios, an HF radio system, things like that. And
that's a good example right there, Dietrich. You made me jive. So when you guys were going through all of that with Gage, and you were using the FRS radios to communicate with him, you tell the story of about 2:00 one morning, you heard somebody hollering on the radio, and it's because you were using those FRS radios. And, of course, we rolled out some secret squirrel stuff to prevent that going forward. But
when Gage was super sick, like we were scared that he couldn't, physically use his phone, or he was so weak. So we gave him a little FRS radio, and then, man, like I remember that night, like he woke up because people were just goofing off on the radio. And so then Matthew fixed this up, and now we have like our own little comm center on our stuff. So we're good. But having a backup plan, even joking about, when I got my ham radio license, Matthew was like, "You should go get your HF license." And I was like, "No." Like,
this is great.
I don't need to be an expert at radios. Like I have you. Like if I want a radio to do this, I'm like, what do I need to do? Like, I was like, "Matthew, I want to listen to the airplanes flying over the fire." And he was like, "Well, this is the radio you need." And then a few minutes later, I got a radio on my side that I'm listening to the aircraft. And so if Matthew wants a first aid kit, he can have a first aid kit. Like I'll tell him exactly what he wants. So I was like, I don't need to be an expert. I was like, your family lives almost within eyesight of me, and your dad's a huge radio guy. He's got the antennas up, huge guy, knows a lot about radios. I was like, I have a 308 with a suppressor and a tripod. It goes right out Gage's window. I can send Gage down the road to talk to your dad and to come back, and I can almost spot him the whole way. And I was like, no, I don't need a radio plan. He's like, that's fair.
But, you bring up a good point, in talking about emergency communications, and you and I and several others in the area, we've had multiple conversations. And so I think what we each bring in our strengths to the party is overcomes the weakness of somebody else. We joked about it. What's in my medical kit? Whatever Dietrich told me to put in there. It's the same thing. It's having those strengths, having those communications. But I also think that going back to Helene, there was a couple of things that, as much as I've tried to plan and prepare for, obviously, as we age, we have different things, and I have a CPAP now, and I never took into account, because we wouldn't run the generator at night. We would, I think most people that had generators, you cut it off at night just to conserve, get a little peace and quiet, for lack of better words. And I didn't have any way to run my CPAP. And Dietrich, he says, "Hey, I've got one of these extra little Jackery battery kits. If you want to borrow it." I'm like, "Heck yeah, man! I got to get some sleep, because once you get used to those CPAPs, you can't sleep without them." And so brought it home, and then there were several things throughout the week we exchanged. He had some neighbors that had a need, and we hooked it up. Of course, I think the night we brought the generator, you come and got the generator, you got power back that night. So it's like, man, we should have got you a generator sooner.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because we had, like, our business was shut down, so we couldn't ship orders out. We had no power. And so finally, I was like, Matthew, like, I gotta get power to my business. Like, we gotta get orders shipped out. People don't understand we had a hurricane come through in their part of the country. So I went and got a generator, and Matthew brought it over, and then the power came back on. So if you were a family, we kind of talked about that a little bit, was like, building a plan. So you're thinking like cell phones, FRS radios is something super easy, but there's different types of radios out there, like different frequencies. Some you need a license for, some you do not need a license for. So kind of help us with that, because everyone gets the Baofeng radios. They see them on Amazon, TikTok shop, and they think they can just key it up and start talking.
That's that's a really great point. And I just grabbed a Bofang radio. You can get them cheap off the web, and a lot of people buy these radios and then they get them, and it's like the dog that chases the car. What am I going to do now that I've caught it? And so there's several different options, and as a family, one of the things I recommend everybody do is to get your GMRS license, and it's GMRS stands for General Mobile Radio Service, and it's can be used in talk around. You can there's repeaters that are available that can be used in various areas, but the GMRS license covers your entire family, not just you. And it's a really good tool. I can't remember what it costs now, but it's good for several years. There's several videos on YouTube stepping through how to do it. It's in the UHF band. There's a ton of radios out there that are capable of doing GMRS specific radios. Whatever the case may be, there's tons that are out there. That's the first thing I recommend doing, and then I recommend playing with them. Whatever radio you get, play with it, learn how to use them, learn where they work, where they don't work. Another good option for you is if you're trying to learn comms is grab a scanner from somebody, start looking at resources such as Radio Reference and seeing what systems are out there so you know what works. If you're in an area that primarily has VHF and in your public safety sectors, then that should be a clue to you. I need to look at something in VHF. Well, VHF for civilians, there's the MERS, cannot talk, MERS channels, and that stands for multi-use radio systems. I promise you, I'm okay, and I'm not having a stroke.
You having a stroke? Like, I'll call 911 for you. Give it 5 minutes.
Multi-use radio service, and it's 5 channels that are available for use in the VHF. They're talk around, they're not repeaters, but that'll give you greater range than talk around on UHF will. If you're in a mountainous areas, in contrast, if you're in an urban area, then you're going to want to probably stay UHF and even higher. So you've got FRS is the family radio service. It's limited in power. Some channels are up to 2 watts. Some are less than half a watt. There are FCC qualified radios. To be a compliant device, the radio can't have an antenna that's detachable. So that's really good if you're just a limited local area and you just want to have communications intermittently with the family, or my grandkids. We've got FRS radios for them to play with, just because they're FRS. They tear them up, they leave the battery on. Who cares? But they have fun with that. You've got MERS, MURS, and you've got GMRS. Now, if you really want to get into comms, I encourage you to get your ham radio license, and that's the technician class amateur radio license. We call them ham, but the official term is amateur radio license, and that gives you as an individual the capability or the authorization to transmit on frequencies you otherwise couldn't. And it also gives you the opportunity to experiment and look into a wealth of people who, it's a hobby. They're enthusiasts. Twice a year, there's 2 major exercises. There's Summer Field Day in June, which is the last weekend of June, and then Winter Field Day is the last weekend in January. And it's all about communicating, for lack of better words, off grid. You can't use the internet. You can't use repeaters. It has to be radio to radio. There's even satellite communications to a satellite. It's complex, but it's doable. So there's a lot of capabilities that are out there. This FRS, GMRS, MERS, amateur radio, and then of course I'd be remiss if I didn't mention CB radio. CB radio was all but dead just a few years ago, and you're starting to see a resurgence of CB radios and enthusiasts come back. For years, you hardly heard anybody on the CB radio channel 19 on truckers, and now you're starting to hear truckers with CB radios again. So all of those are relatively inexpensive components that you can get into and can offer you more capability.
I actually used the CB radio a few months ago. We were going up to Tennessee and up through 40 going up through there, and there was a wreck and traffic's all stopped. So I dig out this little small handheld CB, so I don't have very much distance with it, but I plugged it in and was able to hear the truckers talking about the wreck up the road. And they're like, "Oh, let's be clear in a few minutes." Like, they were talking on channel 19, and so I was able to hear just on CB because I did key up on the ham radio and no one answered me back. So then I was like, all right, we'll try CB, and was able to hear there was a wreck up there and it was going to be clearing soon. So I was like, okay, so it is coming back. Like I remember, like in high school, like we all had CBs because we were four wheeling with our vehicles and stuff like that. So we kind of used it that way. Do you want to talk about queso? That you're out of queso?
Oh yeah. That was so. I got to think how to tell this story. So prior to my retirement, I would get asked to come assist in comms for events in other agencies, and
just don't mention any names. Like you don't have to mention where we're at. Just
yeah. So this agency called and says, "Hey, can you come? We've got a protest that's being planned," and this is back in during the time frame when a lot of the protests were using GMRS FRS channels, and it's that's the one thing to remember. I mentioned FRS and GMRS. There is no privacy on those channels. There is no expectation of privacy. Those are open. Anybody can hear them. Anybody can listen to them on radio scanners, whatever. So there is no expectation of privacy. And so Dietrich and I went up and we went up on top of a building and we were listening. And basically we were just scanning, common channels. And it's kind of boring, wasn't a whole lot happening. And we were in a kind of a restaurant district. And this female voice came on a channel and the signal was very strong. And she said, "We're out of queso. I say again, we're out of queso." And Dietrich and I looked at each other and he's like, "It's kind of odd, wasn't it?" I'm like, that was very odd. We never before heard her and never afterward heard. So initially you could dismiss it and say, okay, you're in a restaurant district. And I don't know how much you know about the upstate of South Carolina, but there's a Mexican restaurant on every corner. So, you could almost dismiss it. But what if queso, we're out of queso, meant something else? And during times of disasters, if you're using those common radio systems in those channels, you need to be very careful with what you say and what information you disclose, because somebody is always listening. My good friend at Wyoming Survival, he and I, we joke about it. He's out in Wyoming, and he was talking about if I'm transmitting on the ham frequencies and I don't have a ham license, is it illegal if nobody can hear it? And I'm like, of course it is. He said, who's going to hear it? We're in Wyoming. And, somebody's always listening. Somebody is always listening. And so you don't want to give up unnecessary information. Hey, I'm leaving the kids at home by themselves while I run to the store. You don't want to do that. You want to, maintain some level of security. And the queso one sticks out in my mind because don't know what it was. We never before or after heard that female voice or anything like it. But, who knows?
Somebody was out of queso. It's a bad day.
Yeah.
It's a bad day. I mean, I like some queso. I had a hot meal that evening. I don't know about anybody else, but I did.
Hey, lessons learned. Sometimes you gotta learn the hard way. But yeah, like that's what we kind of talked about before. Like if something were to happen and we need to talk on FRS radios or something else, those channels, as a family, we were in this because we've got lots of neighbors that we've built relationships with, and things went south again. We would just set up, maybe it's just a piece of paper that says, hey, this is what, if I'm out of fuel, fuel means cookies, hey, I need some cookies, things like that. And hey, have you taken the trash out? Like that means something to kind of hide that whatever reason. So, because people are listening. So
they call that a brevity matrix. And, and that's part of the communicating without technology before the event happens, having that plan in place and making sure that you only share that with people that need to know that is very critical.
So one of the things that how do hams like help emergency management, like during these disasters, stuff like that? Like how do ham radio clubs, how do they help emergency services?
So this is one of those things that it depends on the ham radio operator. I will say that it is not a requirement for you to participate in emergency communications to get your ham license. There are some people who think that because they have their ham license, they automatically are qualified to operate during emergency communication. So the one thing I'd tell you is that ham radio operators, you've got we as ham radio operators have the ability to transmit and experiment on spectrum, on frequencies, on systems that other people don't. So we got to learn. The first thing that a ham needs to do, a club, a group, whatever, if you don't have a relationship with your emergency manager, you need to go offer to buy that emergency manager a cup of coffee. Go sit down and start building a relationship with them before the disaster ever happens. Hey, here are the services that we as a club can provide you. Here's what we can do. Here's our capabilities. Like, for example, did you know that ham radios, within ham radio, there's the ability to send and receive email without internet? It's a service called WinLink, winlink.org. So if today's emergency manager is like my middle son and doesn't know a life without technology, he doesn't want to know how you're going to send that message. But if you can turn your laptop around and say, hey, send your message, send your email right here. And when you get through, I'll send it over the radio. That's the kind of services that ham radio operators can provide. When you lose comms, after an event or during an event, ham radio operators can give you the capability to help restore comms. Even down to historically, there have been cases where ham radio operators have actually got into vehicles, patrol cars, ambulances, fire trucks to provide that emergency communications. There are Bluffton Fire Department down around the coast in the Beaufort area and I don't know if it's still this way today, but once upon a time, before you could be promoted, you had to earn your technician class amateur radio license. That was part of their hurricane response plan. They had 2-meter ham radios in their fire apparatus in case they lost communications during a hurricane. So, ham radio operators can provide a great service. Another, and this is something that we've seen multiple times here in our area. It was February of 2020. We had, it was completely they were forecasting heavy rains, but they weren't forecasting the level of flooding we got. It was just an anomaly. Front stalled and dumped copious amounts of water, as they say in hazmat. And so I'm up early that morning, as I usually am. I'm drinking my coffee, and I turned on our local Skywarn 2-meter repeater. 2-meter is VHF and amateur radio. And I heard a couple of ham radio operators start talking about roads that were flooded in the Dacusville area. And I'm like, what? Because the area they were talking about you wouldn't think would have flooded. And so I got on the radio and talked with them, verified it. And then I called our emergency manager and I said, hey, we've got roads flooding. And she said, no, we've got no reports of road flooding. I started reporting them to them. And no sooner I got it out of my mouth that her phone had started ringing on the line. So the very first reports we as a county got of flooding came from amateur radio. And but I think, again, I go back to before the event happens, we knew which repeater was going to be in use. We knew which one, these hams knew which repeater. Now they weren't reporting. They were just chatting with each other because to them, it was just a local event. This road was flooded. They didn't realize that was key information that we as a county needed to know. And, but when we started talking, well, that opened up the floodgates, for lack of better words, because we started getting other reports. And so I literally sat in here at my kitchen table and started writing down reports from amateur radio and passing it on to the EOC. And then finally, one of the other net control operators got on and took over so I could leave and go to the EOC.
Yeah, like during storms, like I flipped on the Skywarn channel, and like so I'm listening to my county radio, got Skywarn going, and like just we had the tornado come through. That was one of the first things I did was click on the Skywarn video or ham radio because I knew they would start reporting, and you could listen to where the storm was coming across the county just by that radio traffic.
That situational awareness is critical, and I think it's hard for us as public safety professionals because we're inundated with information at times, and so I think those of us that provide that communications role, be it in the public safety sector, or when I teach ham radio operators to work with the EOC or what the FCC calls the served, or the ARRL calls served agency, I teach them that if they ask you what time it is, don't tell them how to build a clock. And then I teach them, learn what information that served agency needs to know. They don't need to know that it's clear and sunny at this location. They need to know, hey, I've got eyes on a tornado. It's got a debris field with it. Hey, this road is flooded and impassable. That's the kind of information they need to know. The rest of the stuff you can just kind of filter out as needed. But I think, and we as communications professional, or I was going to say that earlier, I teach them to be communications professionals and knowing what they need to know and who needs to know what they know. But we as professionals need to know how to deconflict that information and get the important information to the people who need to know it.
Yeah. So over the last episode and this one, we talked about dispatching specifically as that part of communications. And then now we're talking about a more broader topic of communications. So kind of looking at those two different areas, what does someone do if they want to get involved in communications? So first of all, if you're thinking about an emergency, preparing for your family, preparing for your neighborhood, that type of communications, maybe ham radio certification. And then secondly, if you wanted to become a dispatcher or get into that line of work, what would that look like?
So that's some broad questions. So I think it's going to depend on how do you develop a communications plan for your family, for your neighborhood, for your community. I think there's a lot of variables there. I think the first step, and if you've noticed a trend here, is sitting down and communicating before the event. Here's how we plan to do, and then try it. Don't come up with a plan and say, all right, we got our plan, let's wait for the next disaster. No, pretend there's a disaster. All of us that lived through Helene, we know what worked and what didn't work. We need to teach other people about those events. So try it. Pretend your cell phone doesn't work and you can't make or receive phone calls, text messages, or better yet, what happens if you lose your contacts list in your phone? Do you know phone numbers to people anymore? Do you have that wrote down? I mean, I've got it wrote down in my back here. I've got phone numbers for key people and key agencies wrote down on a Rider in the Rain notepad for that event. So your phone, your alternate phone, how about neighbors' phones? What if maybe there's just a degraded signal? Maybe your neighbor has cell service, but your family member doesn't. Hey, I can't get a hold of my wife. Can you go over and check on her, please? Those kinds of things are critical. Then you start getting into radios. I think if you're just starting to get into radio, go buy a couple of FRS radios. Go spend $20 or $30 at Walmart. Buy you a couple of FRS radios and learn to talk on the radio. That sounds silly, and we take that for granted because we've all been on radio so much. But you'd be surprised in the classes I teach how many people are petrified to push that push to talk button and talk on the radio. Get on there and talk with the kids. Get on there and play with the kids. Play with the grandkids. Whatever. Learn to talk on the radio. Learn to be brief. Learn how to use the radio. What the volume knob does. How to change the channels. What's a PL tone? And then I would start gradually moving into GMRS. Preference is I would want you to move into ham radio, but sometimes that's just not practical. GMRS covers your whole family. So that's your building blocks. You've learned with the FRS. Now you're growing your capability in the GMRS. Man, this comm stuff is cool. I think I want to learn more about it. Then get into the ham radio. And then start talking with your community, your neighbors, and I think the term is area study. Conduct an area study for your neighbors. Do you have elderly neighbors? Do you have widowers that are home alone? Know who those people are, and that are close to you, and look after each other. What belongs, what doesn't belong, and then maybe that widow that lives down the street, maybe you teach her how to use the FRS radio and talk with you on it. So there's the possibilities are endless there that you could get to, but it starts with having a conversation. It starts with a plan, and then exercising that plan, and then figuring out what you need to improve on it. Dispatch. I don't know of a single dispatch agency that is not looking for qualified, good help. And it's funny because we all beat dispatch up, but I said it on the last episode. When you go to work for a dispatch agency, you do not get issued a crystal ball. It doesn't exist. So they take information from people, and literally people will call 911 and say, there's a car over here on the side off the road. I just don't know if somebody needs to know about it. Is it a wreck? Is there somebody hurt? Well, I don't know. I didn't stop. I just wanted to let somebody know about it. So what do you do as a dispatcher? Do you say, oh, well, yeah, we'll tell Highway Patrol about it? So, what do you do with that? And so to get started in it, find where your local dispatch center is, your PSAP, and start having some conversations. Get online, fill out an application. They'll train you. They'll teach you.
Mhm.
They'll give you the
Mhm.
skills that you need. And this is the cool part. A lot of your dispatchers, the only thing they know of talking on a radio is a computer screen, because it's all done on computer screens now. It's not physical radios that are sitting on a desktop anymore. Most of our dispatch centers that I deal with have backup radios sitting on the desktop, but it's all on a computer screen. They'll train you. I know several 911 center directors that would love to have good applicants to apply, and they're always looking for good help. So just look in your local jurisdiction, get online, fill out an application, and start a conversation with them.
It's great.
And then to get your ham radio license, that's a test, correct?
That is a test. It is a test. I'm sorry, I don't know. I should have looked up the test fees and the license fees. Don't hold me to this, but I think it's $35 for the license fee, and then the test is $10 or $15. But there's a website called QRZ.com. It's Q as in Quebec, R as in Romeo, Z as in Zulu.com. It has there's a section in it that's got practice tests for you want to take the technician class license, start learning that. I would be choosy. There's some really, really good ham radio clubs out there, and there's some that are not so good. So I would look for the ones that are really active, that are putting stuff out there where they're teaching and they're holding classes for new hams. Those would be the ones I would want to look for. And then the ARRL.org is a great resource for getting information about becoming a ham radio operator. And then most places, they have what they call VE sessions, voluntary examination sessions. Once you get prepared, it's a written test, and it's a lot, and it's really intimidating when you first start into it. But the more you play with it, the more you experiment with it, the more it becomes natural to you.
So you think even Dietrich could pass the test?
He did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he did. So the question is, can Bobby pass the test?
Yeah.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I took it during COVID. I didn't really have anything else to do, so I took my technician license and got passed. I didn't go even further than that, but yeah, I did test, and it was like ham radios for dummies, or something like that. It's super easy, and like I said, I think just it's doable.
My joke when he passed his test was, it's so easy a paramedic could do it.
That's right.
Exactly. So
Well, hey, I think we should have had
for you, Bobby.
We should have had Starlink support this episode, sponsor this episode.
Yeah, I'm running off Starlink, so
yeah, we talked about Starlink. You're running off Starlink for this episode. You've had a really good connection, audio and video, this whole time. But unfortunately, we didn't. So, go ahead and talk to us again like you did last episode. Tell us about Fleet Talk by Rock and what you guys do, and give us a little ad for your company.
Sure. So Fleet Talk by Rock, fleettalkbyrock.com's website. We own and operate the world's largest Next Edge digital radio system, the largest number of repeaters in the world. And we provide critical communications to numerous public safety agencies, schools, utilities. The customer base is growing. It feels like sometimes daily. We're really, really blessed. Two-way radios, anything from inexpensive push to talk over cellular all the way up to P25 subscribers and systems. We are a full solutions, full suite dealer, and I'm really fortunate that Fleet Talk by Rock does support my participation in emergency communications podcasts just like this one, and it's a great tool. If you have questions, you're in the South Carolina or the Southeast, give us a look, give us a website, give us a call.
Excellent. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the plan for next month is that we're going to record in person at the Skinny Medic residence in South Carolina. So
yeah,
that'll be fun, and we're going to do some jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to work on how to edit some jiu-jitsu videos. So,
he likes editing videos when you do better than he does.
Oh yeah,
they're carefully edited here. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna show me videos when we get my butt whooped. Heck no. So, there's a new guy showed up to jiu-jitsu this week, and his dad actually is a pretty big YouTuber in the area, and he was talking about stuff, and I was like, look, you just can't post on social media. You whoop my tail. I was like, that's the only rules everybody has. You just can't post it. I choked out Skinny Mac 4 times tonight. You can't post that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, we'll edit some videos. So awesome. Thank you guys.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you. Talk to y'all next month.
Find us and subscribe at civmedical.com.